Our theme this month is purpose. Where's my topic? I got the gist of it, but I want to make sure I say it right. Anchor your purpose in spiritual practice. Anchor your purpose in spiritual practice. So I didn't know I was going to go this direction today, but I'm always obedient. So in between ironing my clothes to get here in time for the pancake breakfast, Spirit said, pick up your Bibles and do some study here. And I get it now. Now I'm really, really clear why this is the message now. And I've never done this before, but that's how important I'm hearing that this is. So I'm asking the ushers to pass something around, and I'm asking Adam, so I made a PowerPoint slide. Yeah. So there's a Bible verse. This is Gospel Sunday. There's a Bible verse, and we're going to break this thing down. And there are two different versions that are there. And the two different versions are purposeful in our trying to understand some of the things that we have been talking about. One of the things that I've been saying over and over and over again is that our identity is so important because it creates the narrative through which we see the world. See, your experience of the world is not what happens to you, but how you name what happens to you. And how you name what happens to you depends upon your identity. Okay? How do you see myself? How do you see yourself now? Are you the victim? Is that your identity? Is this happening to you because of your age? Is this thing going on because I'm a mom? Is it going on because I'm this thing or I'm that thing? Or, you know, it's like whatever that is, the way that we are looking at ourselves is formulating that. When I do healing relationships workshops, I'll often tell people, in order to heal this relationship, stop talking about them as your mom. Stop talking about them as your husband. Don't necessarily do this to their face, but in your therapy moment, just whatever. And David, you know, my dad left me when it was, no. David moved to New York. Then that at least gets you into curiosity. Well, why did David move to New York? Because when we put the identities in there, it comes with all these expectations. You ever notice that in relationships? How sometimes you're just doing just fine till you go to deeper levels of commitment? And it isn't the commitment, it's the layers that you put on top of it. Well, if you're my spouse, you're my partner, you would do this. As opposed to when we were just friends, oh, okay, this is who you are, that's fine. I'm saying. So our identity, okay, who we see ourselves as being. And it's so important that your identity, your primary identity, be that of being a spiritual being. A spiritual being. A spiritual being is transcendent of any of the labels or things that are going on this earth. I'm not saying that all of those identities aren't important, but they just inform us. Don't let it define you. See, the fact that I'm black, the fact that I'm African American, the fact that I'm a lesbian, the fact that I'm a baby boomer, you know, the fact that I'm a woman, you know, it's like all of these things, the fact that I pastor here, like all of these things are part of the stuff through how life expresses through me uniquely. Okay, but it's not me. That's not the all of me. Are you with me? So that identity stuff is your context for the content, which is your spirituality. The content is your essence. The content is the you that is transcendent. The content is that soul part of you that is immortal, that soul part of you that doesn't die, it isn't born, it goes on forever. And it just wants to be itself in, through, and as you. But we're busy letting the identities tell that immortal part of us how much it can do. It's saying, hey, I'm here, let's play. Oh, well, we can't do that because we don't have that much money. No, we can't do that because, we're too old to do that. Well, we can't do that because we don't have the education. We can't do it, and we can't, and we can't. And this is with your own self now. We can't, and we can't. No. Because the moment that you get into the sense of being a spiritual being, you get into the infinity of it all. I had the extraordinary experience yesterday morning. For a few hours, I was on this Zoom call. I've been a speaker for the past few years at the Science and Non-Duality Conference, and I'll be doing that again in a few weeks. And they've started a program called the Young Sage Program. And this is for young adults 18 to 24 years old. And they sponsor them and bring them into the conference from around the world. And now they've expanded this program so they build community with them a month in advance and afterwards with all of these, calls and materials and all of the rest of that. And I kicked it off. I kicked that whole program off yesterday morning. Now, these were young people from all over the place. It was just extraordinary. They were coming in from the Netherlands, from India, from Mongolia, and just, some of the United States as well, but from all over the place. And the whole kickoff thing was this: what is our identity? And what is our true spiritual nature? And I was impressing them upon them so much that what I say here all the time, you're a verb. You're not a noun. You are a verb. You are a place and space of activity. You're a vibratory frequency. We are activity in motion. Now, when you know that you are activity in motion, then you don't feel stuck. When you know that you are in activity in motion, you are open to greater possibilities because the essence of you is infinite and it can never fit into the finite. We're trying to take the great of all that we are and squeeze it down into all this little personality stuff. And it's saying, I'm transcendent of that. There's more about me than what's going on with you. And when you open up to that and you can feel the infinity of that, you realize that there are opportunities and choices that you didn't know. One of the affirmations speaks to this. And I remember hearing that from one of my students, Jeffrey Lyons, who's one of the new practitioner graduates. And when he first was studying with us, he used this phrase that he was living in the spaciousness of choice. Oh, the spaciousness of choice. And notice, when we don't feel like we have choice, we feel restricted. We feel constricted. And we feel stuck. And there's something about knowing that we are spiritual beings that elevates us up to a different level of spaciousness, where we realize that there are choices that are available to us that we don't even know about. And here's the good part. When you're living in that place of the spiritual awareness of who you are, you don't even have to know what the choice is. You're just living in the spaciousness of it. Listen to what I'm saying. You don't have to know how it's going to be resolved. You don't have to know how it's going to be healed. You don't have to know how it's all going to line up. You are living in the spaciousness of the possibility. So there's a Bible passage that really speaks to this. It's quoted frequently, but usually not the whole verse. We've heard this term, all things work together for good. Yes, we've heard that. And that's usually it. That's all we hear. And we don't hear the whole verse. But the whole verse is really instructive. So I put two different versions up here. The first version is the King James Version. And I have the King James Version not because it's the most accurate, but because it's the most popular. That's the version that's been used the most. And when you hear most people quote the Bible, they are quoting the King James Version. It's very beautiful. It's very poetic. So when you hear things like, consider the lilies of the field, how they toil not. That's really beautiful. Okay? It's really weeds. It's really just wildflowers. Consider the weeds. They're not struggling. And they keep growing and plenishing. So it doesn't sound like quite as sexy. But yet, sometimes when you reduce it down to what it's like the most fundamental essence of what's being described there, sometimes you get a broader view. So when you look at the King James Version of this, you get a certain kind of impression. So the King James Version says, it says, and we know, and that's important. This and we know, and this know is not a know like book know. This is the experiential know. This is the know where you have seen it, and even beyond experience, this is a know that is an intuit know. So it comes from our senses, but not just like our five senses, but our inner senses too, where we can discern this. It's like there's something that we know. It's happened so much, we've seen it so much, we've experienced it so much that we can bank on this. We can bank on it. It's happened that much. So in the King James Version it says, and we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are the called according to his purpose. I'm going to say that again. And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are the called according to, and it's italicized his, which means it isn't even in there really. They stuck it in there. Anytime it's italic, so the his was added in there. Yes, who are called according to his purpose. It would have been just purpose. Okay. Feel that. We know that all things are working together for good to them that love God, to them who are called according to his purpose. So it makes it sound like there's like an exclusive bunch of people. There are these people who are somehow called, and something good is happening like to these people. And we're not even exactly sure who these people are. Like, you couldn't exactly name them, but they're getting something that everybody else isn't getting. Like something's being doled out to them. Like somehow the universe is like doing something for them. A more accurate translation, and other translation is taken out of one of my interlinear Bibles, which runs the English and the more original language simultaneously. So this is running Greek and English simultaneously because the New Testament is done in Greek. And this would be a more accurate translation straight out of the Greek. And we know to the ones loving God. We know to activity. We know to the ones loving God. All things work together for good to those according with the purpose called being. All things, and we know that to the ones loving God, I'm going to break this down. To the ones loving God, all things work together for good. To those according with the purpose called being. Baby, I contend that's a different story. I contend that's a whole different story. Let's break this down. And we know this, all things are working together for good. In my mind, I used to think, well, that makes it sound like a long time ago. Most of my life, I thought this was the promise that it would all come together at some point. Somewhere down along the line, it would all kind of make sense somewhere. Okay. In the distant by and by, way down yonder. No. This isn't by and by. This is real time. This work together, the root of it is to be a fellow coworker, to be in cooperation. Think of the difference of that. Not there's this strange thing over here, and this strange thing over here, and this inexplicable thing over here that are all independently doing whatever they do, and somehow or another, they're eventually, like all roads lead to Rome, like somehow eventually they're going to all get together. Like these different strands over here. No. It's working in concert, in cooperation, in real time. Think of the difference of that. Not there's bad stuff over here, and maybe there's good stuff over here, and eventually the bad stuff will lessen, or eventually the good stuff will take over the bad stuff, and there'll be these scales, and they'll outweigh each other, or whatever it is, like some end result. No. Can you imagine that if your perception was that while this is going on, this is for my good? Oh, not later on, somehow or another, kind of maybe sort of, there's going to be a moral to this story. But in this moment, there's a conspiracy going on. Cone with, spire, breathe. To breathe with. And this is all things. This means all things. Any, every, thoroughly, whatsoever, whosoever, whole, everything. All of it is somehow working in concert for good. This is a particular kind of good. This good is a beneficial good. It's a benevolent good. It's a good in which there's a blessing for everybody. This is not a good, like good versus bad. It's not that kind of good. And it's not a good based on just the elements or the qualities. I use this example sometimes. Like this is a good piano. That's a Yamaha grand piano. That is a constitutionally good piano. But the fact that that piano is good doesn't have anything to do with anything else. That's just a good piano. And the fact that that piano's good, thus, okay. But this kind of good means it's going to make a difference. This kind of good means all things are working together for good. They're working together for good. They're working together for some kind of benefit. They're working together for some kind of healing. It's working together for some kind of upliftment. Oh, what a difference that makes when I get out of the pity party of the, oh, why me? And now that I know what I know, I'm rejoicing in the middle of it. Because I know when I get through this, it's like the harder you bounce, the higher you go. It's like that. Where you know you're building some, it's like the life is like a spiritual gym. And you're building some muscle. And like the heavy lifting. It's like, oh, baby, when I work through this, I'm going to have more capacity. When I work through this, I'm going to have more possibility consciousness. On the other side of this, I'm going to be a believer. On the other side of this, you can't tell me nothing. On the other side of this, because I would have proven it. Are you with me? The universe gives us stuff to work through so that we can get to this kind of strength and confidence. You can have this conviction with the victory. You can't have a testimony without a test. You can't have a testimony without a test. You'll never know how strong you are until you've been tested. You will never know how much faith you have until you've been tested. You will never know the sweetness of forgiveness till there's something to forgive. I'm just saying. The interlinear version starts off not with the all things working together for good, but it says, and we know that to those loving God. This is the agapeo love. This is not an emotion. This is not a feeling. This is the oneness love. It's described as a direction of the will. This is a choice love. This is a transcendent love. This is a love where you're connected not because you like it, not because you feeling like you got something in common with somebody. This is the love that I have for you in spite of the fact that I don't like you. This is the oneness connection in spite of the fact that I don't think we have anything in common. Are you with me? It's the choice to stay engaged and to still see yourself connected with it. So listen to this. To the ones loving God, to the ones who are feeling connected to the divine, to the ones who are perceiving themselves is somehow being a part of life itself, that's an identity. That's a vibration. That's the being the verb. That's the being the verb. I'm not just this entity and life is happening at me. I'm a verb. I am a frequency. I am a vibration. I am loving. I am being connected to the divine. When you know you are connected to the divine, then you can see things. You experience things that you wouldn't experience otherwise. When you are feeling lost and lonely and depressed and angry and broke or whatever, you are not loving God. You're not. You may love God emotionally, feeling-wise, but you're not loving. The choir started off this morning with the great commandments, the two biggest commandments. Jesus said was first to love your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your strength and all your mind. To be one with the divine, that every single thing about you needs to be connected to the higher source. That was the biggest commandment of everything. Can you feel that? To have that kind of identity. And second, he says to love your neighbor as yourself. This is not the golden rule. This is not do unto others as you would have them do unto you. There is no other or them. This is love your neighbor. This same love, the same agapeo love as this neighbor is you. So can you imagine if you were walking around understanding that you were one with God, and because you were one with God, you were one with everybody? Yeah. Oh! What a different world this would be. If that was the first commandments that everybody was doing, what a different world this would be. To the ones loving God, you get to experience something. You get to experience how all of that stuff is working together for good because you know it. You're not waiting for somebody to tell you. You're not waiting for something else to change. You are living in the knowing of it. To the ones loving God, to those who are according with the purpose called being. To accord with the purpose called being. And in its definition, this accord doesn't mean just going along with, it means an intensity. There's an intensity there. According with the purpose called being. We said this month that our theme is purpose. Your biggest purpose is just being. That's our biggest purpose, is just to be. And when you are according with that, then everything that happens is working together for your good because it enhances your beingness. It may not protect your positions. I'm just saying. It doesn't mean that all the forms get to stay the same way. It doesn't mean that your body doesn't change, or the relationships don't change, or that the bank account doesn't change. It doesn't mean that. What it means is that there's a sustainability there. It's like the parable of the two foundations. When Jesus says, he who hears these words and uses them is likened to the wise man that builds his house upon the rock. And when the wind and the rain comes, the house still stands. But he who hears this stuff and doesn't do anything with it is likened to the foolish man who builds his house upon the sand. And when the winds and the rains come, great is the fall of the house. Jesus isn't being negative. Cause and effect. You build on truth, principle, like the rock. When the wind and the rain comes, there's a sustainability in your life. That's the only promise. You are not promised that you get to be exempt from the wind and the rain. No spiritual tradition will tell you that if you do the practice, this thing today is about make purpose your practice. No spiritual tradition will tell you that if you practice it, no harm's going to come you. Nobody tells you that you're not going to die, that nobody you know is going to die, that nothing's ever going to change, that you won't be subjected to anything. That's not the promise. The promise is resilience. The promise is sustainability. The promise is rejuvenation. The promise is restoration. The promise is that the stuff may go, but you will stand. That's the promise. Have you ever built something in the sand? You ever built something in the sand? And you know, you hear me say all the time that the only thing that ever needs to be healed is just the sense of separation. What is sand to rock? Separated rock. It's separated rock. So what happens when you try to anchor in sand? It shifts. It shifts. I remember in one of my spirit letters, I was whining and complaining. I don't even remember what I was whining and complaining about. And the letter said, exactly what is it that you need to understand about sand to know that it shifts? Why do you keep asking these questions? That it doesn't matter what you tried to put in the sand. The fact that it's sand means it's going to shift. So what is this shifting sand? It's the temporal world, the world of people, places, and things. If you try to anchor your life in the world of people, places, and things, guess what? When that shifts, you fall with it. You fall with it. But if you stay loving God, if you stay one to the only thing that is, your experience will be kind of like what happens after earthquakes or tsunamis or hurricanes. Your priorities get straight real quick. Real quick. And you hear people say, I'm glad I'm alive. I'm glad my family's alive. That was just a house. That was just a job. That was just a this. I'm glad I'm alive. That's the consciousness we have to have every day. We're like, oh, let me hold on to the house. Oh, let me hold on to the job. Oh, let me hold on, let me hold on, let me hold on, let me hold on. Like, somehow I'm going to die. If this stuff moves, if this stuff changes, I can't live. No. The important thing here is that I'm alive. And I'm living in the spaciousness of if it's not this, it's something else. If it's not this, it's something else. Just breathe that in. It's all working together for good. Not just for some people, but for everybody who feels the connection to the divine. For everybody who is according with the purpose called being. If being is your primary purpose, if you're here being a human being and not just a human doing, if you're being a human being, then life won't feel so much against you. Things won't feel so hostile. You won't feel all the time like you're having to hedge against things. Quite the contrary. Regardless of whatever it is that's going on, when you lay it on the altar and remove that, why me? Why now? Oh, how could you do this to me now? How could you? When you move that out the way, all of a sudden, you will see, and you will see, and you will see so much more. I'm going to end on this because it was one of those snapshot moments. I've mentioned a couple of times about a memorial service that was done here for Sherry Carlson's son, who passed away, young adult, right when she was starting the prac training program. And multiple generations of her family, participated here. And during the service, or right afterwards, between like the repast and going out there and eating in the other building, there was this moment when Sherry's parents, Patrick and Lena, were holding this baby. Okay. Now, they had just buried their grandson. They had just memorialized their grandson. But they had another grandchild, newborn, in their arms that they had never seen before, 6 weeks old. And the joy on their faces. Okay. Now, if they were stuck in the, oh, why me, and why did this happen to my grandson, and how bad and how awful this is, and all the rest of it, they wouldn't have been present for this new life. Okay? The spaciousness of choice. We can stand in the and. We can stand in the and. Just because this thing or that thing's going, it doesn't have to eclipse all the beauty and everything else that's going on. So I had the same experience yesterday. Sarah McEwen in our choir. Her mother passed away not too long ago, and they had the memorial yesterday. And her dad was there, Doug Lockwood. And he was holding one of the grandkids' babies. It's a precious little baby. And it was that same thing again. Here, this is his memorial for his wife. His grandson is young. He's had a child young. But, this beautiful baby. If you don't think it's just about special people, if you realize that you have the spaciousness of choice to love, and if you choose to love life, my last words to the young sages yesterday on that program was about what George Washington Carver, the African-American scientist who discovered all these things about the peanut, said. And we're using his discoveries now in building fuels out of vegetables. He said, whatever you love enough reveals its secrets to you. If you love dance, it'll reveal its secrets to you. You love math, cooking, the spices will talk to you. Music, it'll reveal its secrets. If you love God, the universe, It'll reveal its secrets to you. You love yourself. You love your children. The secrets will be revealed. But what happens is that it really isn't so much that the secrets are revealed as it is you'll be able to see. You'll be able to see what's hiding in plain sight. Because love is that kind of decoder. It's like putting on your X-ray glasses that lets you see what everybody else can't see. You know how you feel when you're trying to get through to somebody and they just can't see, or they just won't see. Don't be that person. You know what? I'm going to ask the choir to come back up here. We're going to do our prayer in song. Because that song that we sang, keep the camera rolling, that song that we sang before the sermon, what a marvelous thing you were doing. You know, what a wonderful thing you were doing, and it's marvelous in our eyes. That's the musical version of this Bible verse. It's all of this glorious stuff is going on, and it's marvelous in our eyes. We can see it because we're loving you. We're appreciating you, God, so we can see it. From the top. Will you do it again? I want to make sure it gets on the camera.
It's marvelous.
Amen, amen. Teresa Ribeiro on solo. It's our Inner Light Choir. Woo, under David Wells. Just soak that in for a moment. Ooh, just soak that in.